Friends, before I share today's episode, I want to tell you an interesting stat. 99% of the people who watch our content enjoy it, but they haven't subscribed to our channel yet. If you're one of those 99%, all you need to do is a small task. Just look below this video, you'll see a subscribe button. All you have to do is click that subscribe button. It's as simple as that. And if you want, you can also press the bell icon so that you're the first to know whenever we upload a new video. Now let's dive into the video. The courtroom was tense, filled with quiet murmurs and shifting eyes. The camera moved slowly, capturing the heavy atmosphere. In the center of it all sat Judge Henry Calloway, an older man with sharp eyes and a smirk that spoke of arrogance. He leaned back in his high-backed chair, tapping his fingers on the desk, already looking bored. In front of him, David Monroe, a young black man in his early 30s, sat at the defense table. His hands were clasped tightly, his knuckles white. Beside him sat Amelia Carter, his older sister, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit. She was calm, her face unreadable, but her eyes held a quiet fire. She had seen injustice before, but this time it was personal. The prosecutor, Matthew Sloan, stood confidently, his voice steady as he addressed the jury. His words painted David as a dangerous man, someone who had disrespected the law. His tone was smooth, rehearsed, and filled with subtle accusations. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Sloan said, pacing slowly, "the evidence is clear. This is not a man who made a simple mistake. This is a man who thought he was above the law. Resisting arrest is not just a crime, it's a direct challenge to the officers who keep us safe." David's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. He had learned the hard way that the system wasn't built for people like him to talk back. Amelia, however, remained still, watching every movement, every word, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Judge Calloway let out a small chuckle, shaking his head as if the entire case was a waste of his time. His gaze landed on Amelia. "I assume you'll be giving us another speech about injustice, Ms. Carter," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The courtroom fell silent. All eyes turned to Amelia, but she didn't flinch. She didn't react the way the judge expected her to. Instead, she simply met his gaze and spoke in a steady, unwavering voice. "I'm here for the truth, Your Honor." A few murmurs spread across the courtroom. The judge scoffed, clearly unimpressed, and waved his hand dismissively. "Let's just get this over with." David sat stiffly, his hands gripping the edge of the table. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for his future, his freedom. The charge against him was resisting arrest, but he knew the real reason he was here. It wasn't about breaking the law, it was about the color of his skin. The jury members shifted uncomfortably. Some of them had seen the video evidence already. It was clear David hadn't resisted. He had raised his hands, complied with every command, yet the officers had tackled him, pinned him to the ground, and arrested him anyway. The courtroom should have been debating the officers' actions, not David's. But Judge Calloway had already made up his mind. He barely looked at the defense attorney, Ethan Reyes, a young and nervous lawyer who seemed to shrink under the judge's cold gaze. "Do you have anything to say, Mr. Reyes?" Calloway asked, raising an eyebrow. Ethan cleared his throat, flipping through his notes with shaky hands. "Yes, Your Honor, the defense would like to call attention to—" "Objection," Sloan interrupted before Ethan could finish his sentence. "Irrelevant." The judge sighed dramatically, already nodding before even hearing Ethan's argument. "Sustained. Move along." Amelia clenched her fists under the table, feeling her frustration grow. This was not a fair trial. This was a performance, and the judge was playing his role perfectly. David leaned toward her, whispering, "This isn't going well." Amelia placed a reassuring hand on his arm. Her voice was soft, but firm. "Stay calm. We're not done yet." Judge Calloway sighed again, rubbing his temple. "Let's speed this up, shall we? We all know where this is going." The words sent a chill through the room. He had already made up his mind. But what he didn't know was that Amelia had a secret that would change everything. The tension in the room thickened as Amelia was called to the stand. Judge Calloway rolled his eyes, his impatience clear. The prosecutor, Matthew Sloan, smirked, leaning back in his chair as if this was nothing more than a formality. "Miss Carter," the judge drawled, tapping his fingers on the desk. "You seem to think you understand law enforcement better than those trained for it. Sloan chuckled under his breath. An emotional sister standing up for her reckless brother. Let's see how this goes. Amelia, however, remained unshaken. She walked to the witness stand, her steps measured, her expression calm. The courtroom was waiting for her to lose control, to break under the weight of the judge's bias. But she had spent years learning how to control a room without raising her voice. She spoke clearly, delivering a powerful testimony about the injustice her brother had faced. The laughter in the room grew louder. Judge Calloway, leading the charge, openly chuckled. Amelia remained silent, waiting. Then, without a word, she reached into her blazer and pulled out a small black leather wallet. She flipped it open with a practiced motion. The courtroom gasped. The light caught a gleaming emblem, a United States Secret Service badge. The laughter died instantly. The judge's smirk disappeared. The prosecutor sat up straighter, his confidence shaken. Amelia's voice was calm but sharp. With all due respect, Your Honor, I've spent 10 years protecting the law. The question is, have you? The judge visibly tensed. His grip on his gavel tightened. The energy in the room shifted completely. The power was no longer in his hands. For the first time since the trial began, Judge Calloway looked uncertain. The balance of power had changed, and everyone in the courtroom could feel it. The courtroom fell into silence as the video evidence was played once more, but this time the jury was truly watching. Every frame exposed the truth, the unjustified aggression, the misuse of authority, the undeniable injustice. Jury members exchanged glances, their expressions shifting. Doubt was creeping in. The defense attorney, Ethan Reyes, now emboldened, stood straighter, his voice gaining strength. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just saw is not resistance, it is survival. The prosecutor, Matthew Sloan, shifted uncomfortably. His confidence was faltering. This does not change the facts, Judge Calloway snapped, his frustration evident. Amelia locked eyes with him, her voice unwavering. No, Your Honor, but it changes who controls the story. In the gallery, reporters scribbled furiously, sensing the shift. The judge, realizing his grip on the case was slipping, tried to rush the trial. Let's move to closing statements, he said hastily. But Amelia refused to let him dictate the moment. She stepped forward. Justice doesn't belong to one man in a robe, Your Honor. It belongs to the people. Several jury members nodded subtly. The tide had turned. The courtroom was thick with anticipation. Every eye was fixed on the jury box where the foreperson stood, gripping a folded piece of paper. A hush fell over the room, the tension almost suffocating. David Monroe, still in his seat, took a slow, measured breath. Beside him, Amelia Carter sat upright, her expression unreadable, but her fingers lightly tapping against the table. The foreperson cleared their throat, their voice trembling slightly as they read the verdict. On the charge of resisting arrest, we find the defendant, David Monroe, not guilty. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, a wave of gasps and murmurs spread through the gallery like a shockwave. Some spectators sat frozen, their mouths slightly open in disbelief. Others whispered furiously among themselves, glancing toward Judge Calloway, whose face had turned an unnatural shade of red. David's body sagged with relief. He closed his eyes briefly, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Amelia reached over and squeezed his hand, her grip firm and reassuring. Judge Calloway's knuckles turned white as he gripped his gavel tightly. He cleared his throat, forcing his voice to remain even. "Order in the court," he barked, but the command lacked the authority it once had. He had lost. With gritted teeth, the judge glanced at David, then at Amelia. His jaw tightened and his expression soured, but he had no choice but to follow procedure. The defendant is free to go. This case is dismissed. Court is adjourned. The bang of his gavel was sharp, but it did nothing to quell the storm of voices in the courtroom. People were already moving, some rushing to exit, others attempting to approach David and Amelia. Outside the courthouse, chaos awaited them. The moment Amelia and David stepped onto the courthouse steps, they were met with a sea of flashing cameras and microphones. Reporters pushed forward, their voices overlapping in a frenzy of questions. "Agent Carter, will you pursue charges against Judge Calloway?" "David Monroe, how do you feel about today's verdict?" Do you believe this case will set a precedent for future trials? Amelia raised a hand, signaling for silence. The noise quieted just enough for her voice to carry. Her tone was cool, controlled. One victory isn't justice, she said firmly. The fight isn't over. David glanced at her, his expression both grateful and determined. He knew she wasn't just speaking for him, she was speaking for every person who had ever been in his position. Every name lost in the system. The reporters continued shouting, but Amelia had said all she needed to say. She placed a protective hand on David's back and led him toward a waiting car. The camera zoomed out, capturing the towering courthouse behind them. But in that moment, it no longer seemed so imposing. Compared to Amelia Carter, standing tall, unshaken, it looked much, much smaller. What happens next? Should Amelia fight back harder? Should this judge be investigated? Tell us what you think in the comments.